And where does the European Union stand in this crisis? Is it a help or is it a hindrance? Well, you may think that we're going to suffer some very serious difficulties, but let me tell you, if we had joined the euro, those difficulties would have been so much greater. We would have had inappropriately low interest rates, which would make the brown boom look insignificant. Those of us that have argued against the euro currency over the years have always said, one size does not fit all. And now we have the proof of that. And let us remember that the European Central Bank, no less than 3 months ago, raised interest rates in the face of a period of deflation. But that's, I suppose, what you get when a central bank is run by a Frenchman who wants to make the bank more Bundesbank than even the Germans intended. What else has the European Union done for us in this crisis? Well, I'll give you one small example. When the private sector came to the Governor of the Bank of England with a rescue plan for Northern Rock, he believed he couldn't act because if he did, it would breach the terms of the European Union Directive on Market Abuse, which our own Parliament doesn't have the power to amend. Thank you very much, European Union. And even in the last week, we've heard from Mr. Sarkozy that he wants the EU to impose measures so that foreign entities do not take an interest in our weakened financial institutions. That's exactly what we do want to happen. It is much better that financial entities from overseas provide capital to our weakened institutions, rather than the taxpayers of Europe are required to put their money in. Mr. Sarkozy, I've got news for you. Protectionism was a major cause of the Depression in the 1930s. Now, let me make one thing clear. The Bruges Group is not an anti-European organisation. We have many allies around Europe. Some of them have joined us this evening. All of us have one thing in common. We're opposed to the directives and to the regulations that the European Union impose upon our people. And we are concerned that our so-called sovereign parliaments cannot change or amend those directives and regulations. Many of them are not in the interests of the prosperity and success of the peoples of individual countries within the European Union. We believe these actions are damaging. We believe that the man in Brussels doesn't know best. Most of us also believe that we would be better off not in the European Union. Most of us also believe we would be better off out if we had never joined. Baroness Thatcher, it's 20 years since you made the Bruges speech. A great speech, but the vision in that speech is still unfulfilled. It's a time to look back, but it's also a time to look forward. When I look back just 18 years, I remember that day you resigned. And I suspect that many of you in this room remember that day. It was a shock at the time. I remember getting the news when I was in my office, and I swiveled on my chair and I stared out of the window for about 15 minutes while my brain tried to absorb the implications of what had happened. I felt that my life would become more difficult, and I felt that the future of our country would be less bright. I felt that the reforms that still needed to happen wouldn't take place. I thought that the powers of the European Union over this country would increase. All of those things have happened. History will show that 1990 was no time for Britain to start resting on its laurels again. It's time to re-adopt your principles and put them at the forefront of our national life. It's time for Britain to reform again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful for you listening to those few words. I would now like to introduce our guest speaker, the Right Honourable Lord Tebbit of Chingford. Tonight, we have a unique opportunity to hear from a man that was at your side during those vital years in opposition and in government, a leading architect of reform, a man whose views have been consistent and constructive throughout. 20 years ago, if I were organising a dinner such as this, I would have chosen Norman Tebbit as our speaker. Today, he still has no rival in clarity and consistency of his views. It is a great privilege to introduce Lord Tebbit of Chingford.